Hi, good evening. You know who I am. And I'm so glad to see some of my friends here, which is really wonderful to see the support that you're giving us, not just me, but also Conscious TV. The Enneagram, I was involved in the Enneagram, I think it was started in 2003 or 2004, I can't remember exactly. And I came across it during my spiritual work, which was with the Diamond Heart approach, and again, Ian and Renate are also very much part of that. And I was so intrigued by the whole concept of the Enneagram and finding out who I am, who we all are, via the personality, via the ways in which we do not know ourselves. So through that particular involvement those years ago, I had met a number of people on the Enneagram, and I drew on my knowledge of these people in order to do the 9 programs. And the way that we actually came to this book, it didn't start at the beginning with putting together the 9 programs. It somehow evolved. And so the book is very much a journey. It has become a journey in the same way that the Enneagram was a journey for me. When I came across the Enneagram, as I said earlier, I was involved in my spiritual work, but at the same time I also was in the process of divorcing from a long marriage, and that was so useful to really get to know more about the ways in which I was behaving in my marriage, and also understanding my former husbands. And so I became so enamored with it that I wanted to find out more and more and more. So not only it was to do with my spiritual work and getting to know the reality that we all are, but also it was to enable me to divorce in a way that was conscious, that was kind, that was real as well. So now, after we did the 9 programs, and I'll get into that in a moment, we also decided to kind of make it a little bit expanded in areas that we had not necessarily touched. So, and the book evolved as a result of these evolvement also of the programs. So for instance, if I go back to the book again, we started off with the transformative role of the Enneagram, for instance, in my life. Then there is a little story with Ian and Renate. Then we have the descriptions of the various different types, which are the panels. And the beauty about these panels, which you don't necessarily find anywhere else written, is the fact that people express themselves in their own type. And so also the transcripts have been kept to demonstrate, to show the ways in which people express themselves in their own type. And that will come across, I'm sure, well, I hope it will come across when you read the book. Part of my interest in terms of my involvement with Conscious TV and some of the interviews that I've done has been about, again, who are we relating to other people? So the interviews that I've done have been all based upon relationships. So this is not just intimate relationship, but also relationship at work, relationship with your neighbors, relationship with everybody. Whether we like it or not, we are relationship animals. So some of the interviews here that we featured in this book are also about exploring different aspects of relationships. We've also included relationship in the Enneagram in business. So as I said earlier, it's not about intimate relationship, it is also how do we deal with the people that we work with and with whom we may have great difficulties. So how do we deal with that? How do we speak the same language? How do we get along? How do we get things done? Another thing that we've also, we came across, I wouldn't want to say by accident, but although there are never any accidents, but anyway, we have, what's contained in this book, we have something that, from a teacher called Faisal Muqaddam, And Faisal has been teaching the Diamond Logos for, I believe, 40 years, but there has been nothing written about any of his teachings. And in Unconscious TV, we've interviewed him 3 times, so we've got 3 transcripts. And one of the transcripts is contained in this book. And the way that he looks at the Enneagram, that's why I called it earlier a little bit of a journey from the introduction to the explanation as to what the types are, to relationships and the 3 different teachers that we've spoken to about relationship, but also to what the Enneagram is about, which it truly is about consciousness, is truly about being who you really are. So what Faisal covers is the spiritual side, while some of the other teachers also cover the spiritual side of it. In fact, that's what the Enneagram really at the core is about, spirituality. But Faisal brings it into a different realm altogether, and without going too much into it, but I just thought it adds a little something, a little different from other Enneagram books. So anyway, so that's Faisal. And we've also included Claudio Naranjo. It's an interview that we've done with him a number of years ago when he came over to teach the Enneagram in London. And whilst the interview is not strictly about the Enneagram, but is about his life, we felt that given the impact and the influence that he's had with the Enneagram, that it was just fair, if nothing else, to include him in the book. So I think that's all I would. There is something that I would like to read again. I haven't given you the history about the Enneagram. You can find lots and lots and lots of information on the internet. But if you do have any question, feel free to ask me, and I may be able to answer it. I may not. But one of the things that I came across is something that Oscar Ricciardo said. Now, Oscar Ricciardo is truly, I'm going to have to read this because I won't remember it otherwise. Now, he's the one that we can somewhat acknowledge about bringing the Enneagram symbol with the old traditions from which the Enneagram comes. So I won't say any more about that, but that's, if you don't know who Oscar Ricciardo is, he's really the, let's say, the founder for the time, in more recent times, and from his teachings at the Arica School, many of the teachers that you will read on the internet or the various books that have been written come from the work that he started about the Enneagram. And so what he says, and I'm going to quote him, he says that the system was designed primarily to help elucidate the relationship between essence and personality. And I think this for me is the most important thing. Who are we? Are we really just our personality, or are we something other than the personality? Even though without, getting rid of the personality, because you can't do that anyway. But it's important to know that yes, we have the personality to navigate the world, and the Enneagram gives a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful description of the ways in which we hold a worldview, and the ways in which we feel the world and we act in the world. We have our own preferences. So that's what the Enneagram helps us, is in recognizing, okay, so this is how I see the world, this is how I act, this is how I feel about life. But it's not the only way in which we can be in the world, and it's not the only way, and it's especially, there's so many limitations that we put onto ourselves that if we were to really discover what these limitations were, then we're much freer. So the quote, so we have to distinguish, he says, Ricciardo says, we have to distinguish between a man as he is in essence and as he is in ego or personality. In essence, every person is perfect, fearless, and in a loving unity with the entire cosmos. There is no conflict within the person between head, heart, and stomach, or between the person and others. Then something happens. The ego begins to develop, karma accumulates, there is a transition from objectivity to subjectivity, and man falls from essence into personality. So to me, that really gives a wonderful summary of what the Enneagram is really about, is to discover, not even to discover, but to be present to what's already here, to the essence that we already are, and it's present all the time, but somehow it's covered by the various different patterns of behavior that we've learned throughout our childhood and then gets solidified in adulthood, and you know the story. Okay, having said that, do you have any questions? Is there I don't remember the name of all of the types, but I can go through it. So, now there is some sort of, depending on which teacher you actually study the Enneagram, you have 9 different types. So type 1 is called the perfectionist. I should have actually written it down, shouldn't I? Because it's going to take a little while. Type 2 is the helper. Type 3 is the achiever. Type 4 is the artist or tragic romantic. Type 5 is the observer. Is it the observer or the knower? Or anyway, they like to accumulate knowledge. Type 6, you can tell me this, Ian. The loyalist. Okay. Type 7 is the epicurist, or sometimes is also called, some help, the enthusiast. Great, thank you. Type 8 is the boss, and type 9 is, I don't want to say, the mediator. Thank you, because there is a particular word anyway also that describes all of the various different types that is based on the 7 sins. So, there we are. Any questions? Yes.
Is there any, or just 2 paragraphs?
Okay, so the question is, what is the link between the Enneagram and what the Diamond Heart approach teaches? And that is to do with discovering your true nature, your essence. So for every, oh gosh, there we go back. In a sense, we can say that you are consciousness, you always are, you've always have been, you always will be. But we are born, when we're born pure consciousness. And then we go through childhood, we go through life. And life gives us a way in which we can survive life at home, life at work, at studies, you know, all of that. And we somewhat lose touch with that true essence. So now the Diamond Heart work and the Enneagram, where they meet is in a way taking off all the various different layers that we've learned so that we can again be in touch with that particular essence. And each type has a specific type of essence. And actually, Faisal Muqaddam talks about that in the chapter. Does that answer your question?
Partially.
Partially. Okay.
Okay,
Okay, so the question is, how do I get along with people at work who are a pain in the neck? You know, and we know plenty of those, even not at work. In your relationship, for instance, you know. Anyway, yes. You know, I can only speak for my own experience of the Enneagram. Now, first of all, there will always be people that will push our buttons. So the first thing to look at is, what is it about me in this particular dynamic that I reject of this person? So whatever it is that we reject of the other, you can bet any money that is something that you reject within yourself. Now, if you have already done that sort of work and you know exactly, and you just know that just this person is just not going to, then another way is you remove yourselves from the situation, because there is no way in which one can really communicate. And the other way is to enter in communication with the other, providing they're open and willing to see also what it is about you that they see in you that they can't quite get on with. And there is an example in the book from Ginger Lapid-Bogda, who talks about the Enneagram in business, giving all kinds of examples specifically about that. But once you learn the Enneagram, you learn to speak their language, everybody's language, because the other thing that we must remember is that we are all 9 types. We all have the characteristics of these 9 types. So whatever it is that we don't like in that, you can guarantee that it's in here, and vice versa. But like in everything in life, you know, one needs to be willing to admit, first of all, that there is an issue, rather than say, it's just that person, and then really come together and discuss it. And if then still is not possible, then one has to remove oneself from the situation. That, you know, I'm only speaking from personal experience.
It's not a question.
Sure, thank you. Not taking it personally, because it's not about you, but it's always about them. But likewise, it's also about you and not about the other. So, you know, the Enneagram really helps you to take responsibility for everything that happens in your life, everything. There's no getting away from that.
And then
That's a very...
also, well, answer that
Yeah,
one first.
so the question is, so are they evenly distributed, or are
Well,
there
some
some types
rare
that are
and some
rarer
common.
than others? I can't answer that question. I don't know if they're evenly distributed, but what I can say is that the Enneagram actually goes across various different cultures.
Well, that
For
was the next
instance,
thing I was going to ask you.
for instance,
Is it sort of
it is
culturally
taught.
different or racially
well,
different?
that's the beauty of it, that, you know, whether you're Chinese, because it's been taught in China, Chinese, whether you're Japanese, whether you're from Russia, yes, and there was another one, Korea, North or South America, everybody seems to be recognizing these types. So it's a real universal typology, let's say. And I think that is the beauty of it. So I don't know if there is an even distribution. I think it's really, I don't know, hard to tell. But certainly the fact that it's recognized so much throughout the world, I think it's a miracle, personally. But
How does it compare with other type? You know, there are other ones, aren't there?
there are other typologies.
Yes,
So
systems of
other
understanding.
yes, there are other systems of understandings. What I found about the Enneagram, I don't know all of the other systems, but what I know about the Enneagram is that it's so deep. And it very much depends on how far you can take it. So you've got people that can take it very superficially and you know, use it at parties and just use it as a way of pigeonholing people and create separation instead of create unity. So that's one level. And then you've got the other level where you really see that the oneness that the whole universe is, and you use the Enneagram as a way of uniting with one another and understanding one another. Like Ian was saying, you know, once you understand truly the various different types of Enneagram, you have so much compassion for where people are, because you know that, you know, that's if the way that they look at the world is so limited, but there is a way of also not limiting yourself by understanding yourself and all the others different kinds of types. That's right. You have to describe, you have to discover your type. It's no good being told, so it really is very, very important that one looks at all of them. Number one, because you just want to know about, you know, if you want to know about yourself, you want to know about other people, especially your children or your loved one or your co-workers. So you would read about all of them, and then you'll see which is the type that resonates with you the most. That's just the very, very, very basics. That's the very beginning. Then, you know, if you feel that little bit freer of your type, of your limitations, then you can take it much deeper, and you've got subtypes, you have all kinds of different ways, the holy ideas, which is more of the spiritual side of, you know, the Enneagram, which is really how it started to begin with. So yes, you can take it as far as you wish it to go. It can be a spiritual path for some people, it can be.
I just wanted to say that, and I do explain this in the introduction that I've done, and I'd like Renata to just briefly talk about her introduction. I found the Enneagram so incredibly useful in my life, because I was, you know, the type 6, which I am, which some of you know about, some people won't know about, they can be very insecure people, they can be fearful people, they can feel quite isolated at times. And when I first, it was one of the Helen Palmer's books that I first was recommended to read. And it was actually Renata here who kind of spotted my type. It was such a relief to find that of the 9 basic types, there's 9 basic types of personality. And we all have little bits of those types in us, but I was essentially a type 6. That it was such a relief to learn that there was approximately a 1/9 of the world population was the same as me, because I didn't know. I just thought, how do I feel and react in one way, and it seems that everybody else feels and reacts in a different way, and I hadn't found many kindred spirits. And I think that was the value of the Enneagram for me, the starting value. And the other thing was that I had, to go with your question, I had tremendous difficulties with certain people. And so Renata and I, when she also discovered the Enneagram, or she discovered it slightly before me, would try and spot different people's types, like we were playing with somebody beforehand, their type there. He's gone now, actually. And there were certain people I just couldn't get on with, and it turned out they were usually type 8s. And when I read more about the type 8s and I understood how they worked, mind-wise, emotionally-wise, feeling-wise, it transformed my relationship with those people. Didn't mean to say it was always completely easy, but I understood the process they were going through. I understood their reality and how they would view me. And I think that fundamentally has been such a huge thing in my life. Not that I am just a type 6, I'm far more than that, as Eleonora alluded to, but on the human level, there's a way of not necessarily getting on with everybody, but understanding everybody. And it is the books of people like Sandra Maitri, who has 2 chapters in there, and A.H. Alma's the head of the Ridwan School, that do take the Enneagram to a higher level. So we're not just looking up as human beings, but we're looking down from the oneness, from the absolute, let's say, and seeing that we are part of something else, as again Eleonora alluded to. I just wanted to say that, and I'd love, if you're up for it, Renata, just to say briefly her story, which is, I think, again, is
So my journey with the Enneagram started about 20 years ago. And the way it started was that Ian, before me, became a student of the Ridwan School, which is the school from Alma's. And he came home from his first retreat, and he was all excited and started telling me about the Enneagram. And I became really intrigued, and he also brought the book along with him from Helen Palmer. And I remember I was sitting in the garden and in our beautiful house in Oxfordshire, and I had this book on my lap. And I didn't know in that moment that in a few moments' time, I will experience the most embarrassing moment in my life. So I opened the book, and the first type which showed up was the type 6, which is the loyalist. I started reading, and the more I read, the more a picture evolved of Ian. And all of a sudden it was Ian, part of Ian as I know himself. And I ran over to his office and said, Ian, I think I know who you are. You're a type 6. And then I started reading some of the other types, and as I came to the type 2, which was the helper, and I started reading. I remember anxiety arose. I became very insecure. I started to feel ashamed and embarrassed. It was just what I was reading was a whole reflection of myself, of things which I was even hiding before myself. And I thought, oh my God, if anybody reads that, they all know now who I am. All my fear, and I'm only a helper because that's the only way I feel loved, that I help everybody. And I was helping, even people who didn't ask me, but that was so in me, and I was craving the feeling of being loved. And then a lot of sadness. After that, a lot of sadness arose, because I also realized how far away I am from who I am. And that's when my journey started, really finding out all the structures I was caught in. And that was 20 years ago. And now I can say I became more a true helper. I will always be a helper. And but I became more a true helper, true to myself. The helping comes from a different place, not anymore motivated from wanting to be loved. That's my little story, but I want to tell another little story. I don't know, do I have time?
Yeah, we have up to, been going half an hour.
Well, a friend of mine went to a workshop, Enneagram workshop in Maui. And it was with the Enneagram, it was with Gangaji's husband, I think it was Eli. And there were like 40 people, and nobody knew their type. And after Eli made the introduction of the Enneagram, about half an hour into the workshop, this chaos broke out. The alarm went on, and a chaos broke out among, I cannot remember why exactly. The fire alarm went off, yeah. So everybody got up, and everybody was running around and doing something and finding out what's going on. And all of a sudden, Eli rang a bell and said, everybody stops. Everybody stopped and looked. Said, don't move. You are caught right now in the type who you are. So all the number 2s were running around helping everybody. All the number 5s were sitting somewhere pretending nothing is happening. All the number 6 were gathered in a corner being frightened. All the number 1s, which is the police, looked that everybody is doing what they are supposed to do, and so forth. You get the picture. So I found the Enneagram really useful in my life, even understanding my own children. And as Ian was pointing out, we still play these little games of saying, oh, this type, this person is an 8, or he's a 2, or whatever. But of course, that's only an outer shell, and as Eleonora said, that's not really who we are in our depths. So that's my little story.